Hello, I'm LegenTerry, and this is Marvel's Spider-Man 2, developed by Insomniac and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Let's start off on the right foot. Spider-Man is awesome. He's my favorite superhero, and he always has been. The character has seen hundreds of different interpretations since his comic book debut in the early 60s, and Insomniac's version of his story back in 2018 did a fantastic job of capturing players' hearts and imaginations. Unfortunately, I didn't own a PS4. So when the PS5 launched and Spider-Man Miles Morales came with it, along with the remastered original, I finally got to jump in. But I wanted to try the shiny new thing, so I started with Miles Morales, and well, the PS5 had some problems at launch. My save file got completely corrupted, so I set it aside to return to another day when the issues were ironed out. Guess who didn't return to it? Those games have sat in my pile of shame for a couple of years, but I still couldn't help but get excited for a sequel to the games I didn't finish. So here we are in 2023, the year of two damn many good games. I have not been able to get back to those because time is a limited resource. I've covered like 7 games in the past 2 months, and that doesn't even include the ones I've played and not made content on. So in my pile of shame they remain. But I've watched some recap videos to get myself caught up on the story of both games with DLC, and I still have the faint memory of how the games felt to play somewhere in the back of my head. And that's where my point of reference going into Spider-Man 2 was. Minor spoilers! I will be talking about the first 1 to 2 hours of the game. If you're not cool with that, go play the opening section for yourself and come back, or skip to the timestamp on the screen. Okay, are we all good? Let's do it. The title screen opens on Harry Osborn, the son of Norman Osborn and best friend of Peter, staring at a tank filled with green liquid and a suspiciously familiar black ooze. After Norman walks into the room and a certain Dr. Connors walks out, he approaches Harry to tell him preparations are complete. It seems like a touching moment between father and son, but it quickly spins into horror as another mass of black ooze springs from Norman's person and latches onto Harry. After passing out, he wakes up in the tank, enveloped in goop, and that's where it cuts away. We pick back up with Peter and Miles a little under a year after the events of Miles Morales, which I believe would mean this game takes place in the autumn, again matching the season in real life. Miles is trying to get accepted into college, Peter has become a physics teacher at Vision's Academy, and both Spider-Men are still up to their usual Spider-Manning. Unfortunately for them, Flint Marko, aka Sandman, has other plans for their first day of school and starts wreaking havoc on the other end of the city. They're yanked away from their daily lives to put the Dry Guy back to sleep, and after a massive set-piece battle, he delivers an ominous statement to the arachnid pair. "You're the ones who are gonna need help when they come for you." Elsewhere, deep in a jungle, a sweaty, burly man gets hunted by Kraven, who seems disappointed by his prey. A henchman shows him that New York is full of hopeful prospects for the hunt, and boom, title splash screen. A little bit of city cleanup later, and Peter finds himself out of the job for abandoning his class during a citywide emergency. Oof. Probably should have been arrested, honestly. He delivers the bad news to Mary Jane, who has also had her share of career uncertainty after her new boss of the Daily Bugle, the one and only J. Jonah Jameson, decides to clean house. Enter one Harry Osborn, looking refreshed and confusingly ungooped. Seems his secret sickness is in remission, and he wants to take Peter on a nostalgic joyride to their old high school. Naturally, they get into some trouble, but then Harry offers Peter a job as co-founder of his new startup company, the MMA Foundation, named after Harry's deceased mother and Peter's late aunt, respectively. His goal is to do all the things they talked about as kids, to improve and heal the world. And I'll leave the rest of the legwork up to the people who decide to play it for themselves. If you couldn't tell from my slightly condensed 6-paragraph long rundown, the story has a lot of moving parts, and I didn't even get through half the elements that come into play. Insomniac are weaving a thick narrative web that's full of tasty little morsels for their audience to devour. A bunch of efficient planning for the plot was written and hinted at in the previous games that seem to be getting paid off now, and I'm really excited to see where things go. And I hope you'll go click that like button and get subscribed. It would really help me out. So, now that we've peered behind the story curtain, let's talk about the presentation of the game. If you can't tell, it looks pretty extraordinary. I've played mostly in performance mode because a steady 60 or even 120 frames per second during gameplay is more important to me than a few extra details between the pixels. And it feels buttery smooth during traversal and combat with no discernible drops in the action. However, I don't know if it's caused by playing in performance mode or not, but some of the faces in cutscenes look weird every now and then. Like, sometimes the resolution is being unintentionally downscaled below where they should be, or the lighting doesn't work on them correctly. Don't take this the wrong way, I'm not trying to feed into the weird internet trend of dudes complaining about women's faces in video games, but it's really noticeable on a character like Mary Jane or any of the side characters who aren't playing prominent roles in scenes. It's also strange to me that they replaced Peter's face model in the remastered version of the first game in Miles Morales to make him look younger. Partly because he now looks the same age as Miles, but mostly because this new face model is a lot less expressive than the original, which had more wrinkles and detail. I didn't even play the PS4 version, and I can see why people are disappointed with the change. I also noticed some other minor oddities like open windowed rooms repeating themselves right next to each other. Unless this guy happens to have a twin with the exact same decor and music listening schedule. When I first booted up the game and started the recap cutscene, there was a little white cursor dot stuck in the center of the screen, which was annoying. But at this point, I'm just kind of nitpicking, so let's get back on track with gameplay. The Miles Morales game did a pretty good job of iterating on the original's gameplay, and Spider-Man 2 takes even larger strides beyond that. Swinging from webs feels just as awesome as you've come to expect, with the addition of new web wings that allow Peter and Miles to soar above the crowded streets. It really makes you feel like Batman. All jokes aside, this new innovation lets you take different approaches and catch even more speed than usual. Add on to that, the developers have placed wind tunnels in the various thoroughfares that crank your speed up to maximum and carry you effortlessly across great distances. There are also rooftops where the Spider Guys can lock themselves into a slingshot and fly across the East River between Manhattan and the newly added Brooklyn and Queens. And if that's not your style, you can just slide across the water's surface like Jesus Christ and use your webs on literally nothing. Combat feels slightly more intentional and gives impacts more weight than I remember from before. Peter's kit has been upgraded with the iron spider legs to match Miles' electric Venom strike powers, which, along with the other Spidey tools, gives you more flexibility and more choices for handling groups of guys in fights. Are they impossible to beat the game without? Probably not, but the flashy new options are really cool and effective. They're definitely appreciated. They may actually make some of the fights a little too easy on standard difficulty setting, as you float between can animations and trap enemies in a constant state of mid-air suspension. Your new abilities sit on L1 plus a face button alongside the assignable Spidey tools, now on R1 plus face buttons. Finishers and healing use the focus bar, and your abilities and Spidey tools get replenished from building the combo meter. But all of these can be improved greatly through suit upgrades and skills by dodging, parrying, and maintaining long combos. The power fantasy this constant feedback loop creates is awesome, but the more complicated controls will take some getting used to. When you do, you can shut your brain off and go on autopilot for a lot of the basic side activity content. There are 3 skill trees in total now, one for Peter, one for Miles, and one that's shared between the duo. I don't know if the black suit powers that Peter gets later on are reflected perfectly in Miles' kit to balance the characters, but looking at the skill trees, it's safe to assume that Miles gets a near equal power up eventually. And no, I don't consider the black suit powers a spoiler. It's been in almost every single trailer and TV commercial, and it's teased on the cover of the game. The only way that you wouldn't know about it is if you didn't know the game was coming out beforehand, so don't at me. Anyways, on the subject of side activities, they are plentiful. Everything from small-time crime stopping to full side stories that send you on lengthy detours to help out citizens. There are photo ops and hidden prowler caches that Miles' uncle left when he served his time in prison, and glass crystals left over from the opening fight with Sandman that contain spoken memories from his past. A bunch of science-themed minigames for the Foundation pop up around the city, and more. It's mostly pretty similar stuff to what came before, but with new variations and in different contexts. In between main missions, the game kind of expects you to take a bit of time to plow through some of these for crafting components and experience points. And as long as they're not super early in the game or at some pivotal plot point, you can swap between the Spider-Men at any time to do them. This is handled really well, like a souped up version of Grand Theft Auto V's campaign character swapping. The load times on switching heroes are nearly non-existent, and you get to catch a brief glimpse of what the hero you're swapping to was doing moments before. Even cooler are the times when you're responding to random criminal activity, and you happen to run into your fellow webhead who will knock dudes out alongside you. And then you can reenact the dumb Spider-Man pointing meme that's been driven into the ground. Really nice touches of personality that go a long way. Good job, Insomniac. I do find it kind of odd that fast traveling is locked behind ranking up your reputation with each individual borough, as if nobody knows that Spider-Man has been around for years. But fast traveling really doesn't matter in a game where traversal is so integral to the experience. And of course, a game set in the Marvel Universe wouldn't be complete without Easter eggs and references to other characters in the fold. I don't want to ruin the fun of finding some of these, so I'll leave most of the sleuthing up to you guys. The voice acting is great. Yuri Lowenthal and Najee Jeter are amazing and nail their roles as Peter and Miles. You can tell they tried to make the guys a little more mature without losing any of the quippy one-liners or the charm. Mary Jane Watson is portrayed perfectly as the journalist struggling against the system once again by Laura Bailey, though I have a really hard time separating her voice from her appearance in my head thanks to Critical Role. And surprisingly, I find myself really liking Graham Phillips' new version of Harry Osborn as this extremely friendly, cheerful guy that was dealt a bad hand in life, but now wants to make the most of it. Story withstanding, those circumstances are probably going to change because the character of Spider-Man never gets to just be happy without caveats, but still, he's fun. The music is right up there with every other bit of Spider-Man content to date. Composer John Pisano blended Peter and Miles' original tracks to make the main theme Greater Together, which lands with pretty good effect. And the swelling score during big narrative scenes, and when you're just out there doing whatever a spider does, never gets old. Kraven's theme, The Great Hunter, sounds really imposing and primitive, using lots of percussion to drive home the fact that this dude is not to be messed with. And of course, there are other song titles I can't touch on for the sake of spoilers, but they feel just as impactful when they show up. Marvel's Spider-Man 2 is an evolution of the first two games on almost every front, and Insomniac continues to prove themselves to be some of the best developers in the world. Visually, there might be a few rough edges that could use polishing, but as an overall package, it feels like one of the greatest superhero games to exist. The gameplay, the characters, the acting, the soundtrack, it all comes together beautifully. If you already have a PS5, buying this game is a no-brainer, and if you don't have one yet, this is a game that should easily sell you on one.